Well, this morning I want to take you down to the lost city of Petra, the rose-red city, half as old as time. Now, Petra is located in the country of Jordan, yes, down near the Gulf of Aqaba. And when I visited this site, and I've had the privilege of being there 4 times now, the last time was just back in October, I literally saw prophecy carved in stone. Now, here's a map showing you the location of Petra. And on all the occasions that I visited Petra, or at least on 3, we travelled down south from the Jordanian city of Amman down along the desert highway. Now, Petra was part of the ancient land of the Edomites, a city that no white man had seen for over 1,500 years. And critics of the Bible story, they argued that the Edomite kingdom never ever existed. And then the spate of the archaeologists dug up evidence from Egypt and Iraq confirming the existence of the Edomites as an independent kingdom. Now, today, the ancient territory of Edom is divided between Israel and Jordan. It's split with the river in between, the Jordan River. Now, Petra, of course, is a Greek name, and it simply means rock, but that hardly prepares you for what you see when you first go down there and see it for the first time. Now, as you go down to Petra, you reach the Wadi Musa, or the Spring of Moses. The Arabs have this traditional site. This is where Moses struck the rock and the water gushed out. Traditional site. And that's inside this building here in the foothills of the valley. And there's the spring that's still running today, and, when there's a lot of rain about, it flows down through Petra. Now, on my first trip to Petra, that was back in 1995, our group stayed in the Petra Rest House, just outside the ancient city. There wasn't too many places to stay back then. In fact, just a few years before this, if you went to go down to Petra, you slept in the caves inside Petra. Well, today, my second visit was in 2006, and accommodation had improved a little, and so did the number of tourists. In 2007, they had 580,000 tourists from around the world visit Petra. In fact, the year I went was the first year they had over 100,000 people. That was back in 1995. But the next year, in 2008, they had 800,000 tourists visit, and in 2010 it hit its peak, it nearly got 1 million. But today, well, at least just before COVID, they were getting over 1 million every year, and it's starting to build up again, even though this war in Israel continues in Gaza. So it's a hot on every calendar, for tourists who visit the Middle East. Petra is up the top of the places to visit. Now, I was there back in February 2019, and I was happy to see the Petra guest house. It had been renovated, but it was still there just outside the ancient city. My fourth visit was in October 2023, and it's just a wonderful place to see. I'll go there again. You have to go there several times to see everything, I think. It's one of the new 7 wonders of the world. And in the early morning on my first visit, back in 95, I walked up the hill overlooking the track down into Petra, and here I saw my first glimpse of the wilderness, the wild, fantastic shapes of the hills, which are like nothing else on earth. And I took the opportunity to read what the old Bible prophets had to say about this lost civilization. You can read the book Obadiah. It's about the Edomites and so on. But nothing prepared me for the marvels that I would see that day, the first time I visited there. And as you go down, you pass what's called the obelisk tomb, which is a very faint prelude to the magnificent rock-cut tombs and temples that you find inside Petra. Now, after walking through the gate, about 1 kilometre, you come to the entrance of what they call the Sikh, which simply means the pass. And this is where the Wadi Musa runs through into Petra. And you can see here there's a dam wall that has been built originally by the Nabateans in order to divert the flood water from going down the Sikh, and instead they wanted it to go down through that tunnel there instead of going down the Sikh. It's been repaired many times. In fact, I think it was just a few years back that there was water gushing through the Seek again. It just overflowed this dam and was going through. It's 1.2 kilometres long, walking through the Seek, and it's no wider than about 15 metres at its greatest width, but it narrows in places that you can almost reach out and touch both sides with your hands of the cliff faces on either side. The colourful cliffs, they rise up on either side about 90 metres above you, and some places they almost touch at the top. And much of the Seek is in perpetual twilight, with the occasional glint of the sun on the cliffs above you. And there's an eerie silence that is only broken by the sound of the horses' hooves as they trot through the narrow pass carrying tourists into Petra. Now, as you go a little further, you can see a channel that's carved into the rock wall that used to carry the water from the Spring of Moses down into the city. Now, they had pipes in here, as you can see inset in the picture here, and they sat in these grooves and they were covered up, and the water would continually flow. They had it at just the right rate of descent, because if it was too much of a slope, it would build up and burst the pipes. So they had it, they were just absolutely brilliant in water management to bring water into this city. They had dams, they had hundreds of water cisterns throughout Petra, pipes that carry water all over the city, and they literally turned a barren desert into a thriving city with gardens and pools and so on. You can see in places the remnants of a Roman road that once paved the entire Seek floor. Now, I just want to give you a minute or two just to enjoy the experience of walking through the Seek. Well, you turn a corner and that's what you see as you come out of the Sikh. The change is so sudden, it almost takes your breath away. They call it El Khazna, which means the Treasury. And it's the overpowering beauty and the proportions of this treasury that amaze you. And the beautiful shades in the rock that change colour as the sun moves overhead. It's 27 metres wide and 40 metres high, or about the size of a 10 to 12 storey building. And there's no mistake in its perfect design. You see, in Egypt, if builders made a mistake in their stone cutting, they could just throw the stone away and start again. But for the skilled stone cutters of Petra, there was no room for error. And you can see the beautiful design on the columns. They're kind of a Greek Corinthian style capital on these columns. And up the top, they have this sort of like an urn, looks like an urn at the top, and it bears the mark of many bullets that were once fired at it. The Arabs thought that there was treasure inside, and so they shot at it in the hope of releasing the treasures that they thought were inside of it. Now, this magnificent temple is believed to have been built in the 1st century before Christ, and it shows a decided Greek style of architecture. It's believed today that this carved temple was originally the mortuary temple or funeral temple of King Aretas III, a Nabatean king. And inside is a large square room, perhaps used as a tomb, but it shows some beautiful colours in the rock that you find throughout Petra. And looking back through the door, you can see then just a narrow cleft in the rock, which was where the Sikh comes out into the valley of Petra. And you can see why Petra was so easily defended. It wouldn't take too many men to hold back an entire army that had just got blocked up in that Sikh there. Now, when Lawrence of Arabia visited Petra back in 1917, he called it the most wonderful place in the world, and wonderful indeed it is. Now, here's a map, and it's, if you're going to go to Petra, you want to do some hiking first to get yourself ready, because you're going to get tired legs, let me assure you. And way off on the left-hand, where are we? On the right-hand side of the screen is the gate and so forth, and you have to walk your way through the Sikh and down through into the open valley, and then you've got to go up hills and down dales to visit everything else around Petra. I certainly recommend that if you're going to go and visit Petra, get a 3-day pass and have 3 days to explore the place, because you'll never do it in one day. Well, as you walk on, you come past what they call the Street of the Facades, and these row of monumental Nabatean tombs carved into the southern cliff face. Further along, you walk out into the open valley itself, and looking around, you see many tombs carved into the cliff face or the rock walls all around you. Wherever you look, there's just thousands of them that are carved around. And if your legs are a little tired after walking about a kilometre to the Sikh entrance and then walking another 1.2 kilometres through the Sikh, you can hire a camel to get around inside. And if you can't afford that, then maybe a humble donkey. They carry anything, these donkeys. And believe me, after a day trekking through Petra, a beast of burden like this is a very attractive offer no matter what they charge. Well, then you come upon this Roman theatre, and it was able to seat about 8,500 people. The Romans, the Petra was on a trade route and through Palestine, and when the Romans invaded the Middle East, they conquered Petra in order to control the trade and put the money in their pockets rather than anyone else. Emperor Trajan, in 100 AD, he built roads and shops and temples in the region, and the Great Temple here, as it's called, is the largest freestanding building that was built in Petra. It was like the Roman administrative centre of Petra, and it was used by the Romans when they took over in 106 AD. In 1998, an excavation revealed the remains of a monumental swimming pool and an elaborate hydraulic system with channels and pipelines they discovered there that transported water to this pool and irrigated a large earthen terrace to the north of the pool, where they had gardens and so forth. Now, it all looks pretty barren today, but this is the temple complex, and looking to the left, this is where this pool site was, and gardens and so on. It must have looked beautiful, when it was all in its former glory during the first century. Now, at its peak, Petra had a thriving population of about 20 to 30,000 people. You go there today and you wonder how in all the earth could 30,000 people live in a barren desert like that. But because they were brilliant at water management, the whole place was like a Garden of Eden, in its heyday. Christianity entered Petra during the Byzantine era in the mid-4th century to the mid-7th century AD. And freestanding churches were built in the area, and some of the tombs were converted into churches. But when the Romans shifted the trade route in the 4th century AD, Petra began to decline in importance. And in 363 AD, there was a great earthquake that destroyed many of Petra's buildings, and most importantly, the earthquake destroyed the city's elaborate water management system. And it was just too hard to fix up, and so Petra just dropped away into decline. By 700 AD, Petra was all but abandoned and became one of the lost cities until its rediscovery over 1,000 years later. Now again, here's the map showing you what we're going to see in Petra. Everything shaded in brown is mountains, and the white is the valley proper. So we're going to go up to the high place of Petra. So here's the sign. As you walk into the valley, you see a sign to the high place, and so we begin our climb. I did this for the 4th time when I was there recently, and it's quite a climb. I did it in 95, 2006, and 2019, and then in 2023 last October. And I don't think I'll ever do it again. But anyway, up we go for your benefit. I hope you are appreciative. As you climb, you get a nice view back down over the valley floor, but there's still quite a bit of climbing to be done. And by the way, I was only in my 20s, when I went there the first time. I'm now over 60. And I wish it was as easy as I did it when I was in 20s, but it's not. It gets a little harder as you get older, doesn't it? Anyway, so up we go, and I climbed up some more. By this time, my legs were starting to complain. Seemingly no end in sight, but finally, after a hot, sweaty climb, you finally reach the top. Now, here's my first ascent. When I reached the top, I was 34 years of age. 1995. And you have up here the twin obelisks. This is one from recently, back in 2023, and I was 62. And I was very proud of myself that I got up there. Don't laugh. This is a serious matter. I was very proud of And you see there these twin obelisks, and what they did, they didn't sort of carve out a stone and tip it up into... No, they carved out the rest of the mountain and left the obelisk there. And from there you can look over, you see the corner of a kind of a priestly temple over on the other mountain there. They call this mountain Jebel al-Madbar. It means the mountain of sacrifice, because this is the high place of sacrifice where they had their pagan sun worship and so forth up there. And finally, we reached the top, and there was a donkey ready to be sacrificed. No, probably carried some poor tourist up there, and it was just having a break. This is the recent photos from 2023. Thankfully, today, the Bedouin have a shop up there, and they're selling cold drinks, and I bought quite a few when I got up there. And from the top, it's a wonderful view looking back down to the valley floor. But up here, they have this high place of sacrifice. And on one of my visits there, I had my guide sacrifice me there on the altar. But some believe human sacrifice took place, but there's no evidence of that. Here's a circular sun altar, and they would make an animal sacrifice there, and this is where they'd sacrifice it, and the blood would run there and down this little channel into a receptacle and so forth. So there it is. They had a pool here where they had water, obviously for washing and so forth after their sacrifices. It's the only high place of sun worship in the Middle East. And they sacrifice their animals or their sacrifices to the rising of the sun. That's why they built them high on a mountain, to catch the first rays of the sun. Now, we ask the question, how was Petra discovered if it was lost for over 1,000 years? Well, it was the Swiss explorer John Burckhardt who in 1812 accidentally came across the city. In 1809, he was commissioned by the African Exploration Association in England to explore the regions south of the Sahara Desert. And so to accomplish this task, he stayed in Damascus in Syria for nearly 3 years to accustom himself to the life and the religion and the language of the Muslims. And in 1812, he set out heading south towards the Gulf of Aqaba. And on the way, his guide talked about a strange deserted city near Mount Hor, where Arabs have a small Muslim shrine to mark the supposed grave of Aaron, the brother of Moses. Now you can see this is Mount Hor, where the Arabs have their traditional shrine there, over there. Well, to cut a long story short, Burckhardt convinced his guide that he had made a vow to sacrifice a goat within sight of Aaron's tomb. Now, you've got to understand, Burckhardt, he almost became an Arab himself. He looked like an Arab, he didn't look like a guy from England. So that they let him down there and he made this vow, and so he brought him in and he discovered this city. He was led down into the city of Petra that no European had seen for over 1,500 years. So in 1812, he emerged to tell the startled world that the lost city of Petra had been found. Now, we make our descent down from the high place, and as we go down the other side of the mountain, we come past the garden tomb here, and then we head down a little further, and you can see the statue of the Roman soldier there. And opposite that is what they called a triclinium, or a funerary banquet hall. It's the only tomb with a decorated interior. You can see the carved columns and so on. Well, after quite a walk, we make our way down to the valley floor and to a refreshing restaurant down there. And that's very nice to sit down and recover. Now, from about the 3rd century BC, Petra became the capital of the Nabatean people who occupied the area. Now, the Nabateans, they were the descendants of Ishmael's eldest son, Nabaioth, and they descended from him. But before the Nabateans occupied the area, Petra was the stronghold of the Edomite civilization. We recognise that the Edomites descended from Jacob's brother Esau. Now, there are 99 references to the kingdom of Edom in the Bible. And importantly, the biblical record states that Edom was a powerful kingdom ruled by kings from at least the 15th century BC. Now, the Edomites, they were the descendants of Esau, the brother of Jacob. So the Israelites and the Edomites were brother nations. And you remember the story of Jacob and Esau and how Jacob deceived his brother Esau out of the birthright. And you have the record here in Genesis. Esau said to Jacob, "Please feed me with that same red stew, for I'm weary." Therefore, his name was called Edom. You see, Edom means red or ruddy, and this is how the Edomites received their name. So Esau dwelt in Mount Seir, and Esau is Edom. So Jacob and his descendants, they became Israel, and Esau and his descendants became the Edomites, who dwelt south of the Dead Sea in this area of territory of Edom. Now you have here in Numbers chapter 20, Moses sent messages from Kadesh to the king of Edom, saying, "This is what your brother Israel says. You know all about the hardships that have come upon us. Please let us pass through your country." They wanted to pass through in the Exodus, from Egypt. And again they answered, "You may not pass through." And Edom came out against them with a large and powerful army. So this is telling us in the 15th century BC, at the time of the Exodus, the Edomites were a kingdom with a large and powerful army, and they were ruled over by kings. So this is what the passage declares. There were kings in Edom capable of assembling a large army in the 15th century BC. Now it's important to remember that. Now it also says in Genesis, these were the kings who reigned in Edom, it says, before any Israelite king reigned. So before there was King Saul, there were Edomite kings down there. This is before the 10th century BC. Then we have this record, and David became famous after he returned from striking down 18,000 Edomites in the Valley of Salt. And he put garrisons throughout Edom, and all the Edomites became subject to David. However, before Petra was known to the modern world, skeptics of the Bible story said, well, you show us the evidence that the Edomites ever existed, because there was no evidence outside the Bible that the Edomites ever existed. And all the believer had was his faith in the Bible to rest upon, because initially there was absolutely no evidence anywhere that they had lived, except for what the prophets had said about them. Now, the first evidence of the Edomites and their existence was discovered on top of this mountain, and also in some records of Egypt and Assyria. They call this mountain el Beara, and it simply means the mother of cisterns, because of many large water cisterns they found on top of this mountain. So on my first visit, we hired a Bedouin guide and we began to climb. And I tell you what, it's a decent climb, for it takes about 2 hours getting up there at a very steep ascent. And on our way, you pass what's called the unfinished tomb that shows you how they carved these temples. They started at the top, carved away a ledge, and then they just carved their way down, not making any mistakes in their brilliant designs. Now, very few tourists go up on this Edomite mountain. There is a track, you can go up there today, but it's no climb for the faint-hearted, let me tell you. By the way, back in October last year, I didn't go up there. I went everywhere else in 2 days. In fact, it took me 2 full days to go up all these places that on my first visit I did in 1 day. That's the difference between 34 and 62. Right. So you make your way up the side of the mountain and you go through a pass that once had a gate to block out any unwelcome guests. And in places the ascent is very close, well, at least the first time I went up, very close to the edge of the cliff. And I thought to myself, you know, if any army who could first get in through that narrow seek and then climb this mountain and still have enough fight in them to overcome this Edomite stronghold, that would have been some army indeed. Well, it's a hot and tiring climb, but finally, after close to 2 hours, you finally reach the top and you look out over the region. And it was through this region of Petra that the Israelites, when they left Egypt, sought the pass. They wanted to come through the Edomite territory. But the Edomites, of course, they had a grudge against their brother nation because of the deceitfulness of Jacob, and so they would not give Israel passage. Now, Crystal Bennett was a student of Kathleen Kenyon, who excavated Jericho, and Bennett was a pioneer of archaeological research in Jordan, and she conducted excavations through this Edomite territory in 1958, in 1960, and in 1963. And on top of this mountain, in their excavations, she discovered a little clay seal. It's, only about 1 centimetre wide. They call it a bulla. It's a seal like from a ring that's pressed into soft clay and to tie to documents and so on, like a signature. And she found this, and it mentioned the king of Edom, Cosgaba, from the 7th century BC. She excavated at other Edomite sites, but she found no evidence of the Edomites earlier than the 7th century BC. And that's where scholars camped. They said there's no evidence, while there might be Edomites, it's from the 7th century BC. There's certainly no evidence in the 10th century BC that the Bible says and David had wars with, and certainly none at the time of Moses in the 15th century BC. So here's the Edomite territory, some of it that you can see that this is the location of Petra. And further up the Arabah Valley in the hills is the Edomite capital of Bosra. And it's on the kind of the edge of a kind of a plateau jutting out over the valley. So it was very well defended. This is in Bosra, the capital of the Edomite kingdom. And when I visited Bosra last, there's a little sign outside the site. And you'll notice it says that This is the capital of the Edomites between 800 and 500 BC. And so Israel Finkelstein, Israeli archaeologist and a skeptic of Bible history, he wrote a book in 2001. In what year? 2001, called The Bible Unearthed, where he said there's no evidence of the Edomite kingdom earlier than the 8th century BC because of the discoveries by Crystal Bennett and so on. This is what he said. Archaeological investigations indicate that Edom reached statehood only under Assyrian auspices in the 7th century BC. Before that period, it was a sparsely settled fringe area inhabited mainly by pastoral nomads. Now, either the Bible is right in its history, that it was ruled by kings prior to King David and a powerful army even in the 15th century BC at the time of Moses, or this fellow is right. One of the two. They can't both be right. Now he goes on, he says, from the Assyrian sources we know that here were no real kings and no state in Edom before the late 8th century BC. Edom appears in ancient records as a distinct entity only after the conquest of the region by Assyria, he said. Now that's his claims in his book. So the question, of course, is to Bible people who believe the Bible, did the Edomite kingdom exist earlier than the 8th century BC? Well, wonder of wonders. In 2002, what year? Israel Finkelstein published his book denying the Edomites in 2001. 1 year later, after he published his book, the largest excavations of the lowland regions of Edom began in the Arabah Valley, conducted by archaeologists of the San Diego University of California, Thomas Levy, and the Jordanian Department of Antiquities under Dr. Mohammed Najjar. And they excavated here at this site, on the Jordanian side, not far from Petra, at a place called Khirbet en Nahas. Now, Petra's in the hills, in the mountains, but Khirbet en Nahas is just on the edge of the valley. Remember, there's a great big rift valley that flows down through Israel and Jordan. And south of the Dead Sea, they call it the Arabah Valley, going down to the Gulf of Aqaba. Now, this site at Khirbet en Nahas is the largest copper smelting site in the ancient world that they excavated. Its name simply means ruins of copper. And they have discovered around Khirbet en Nahas, and about a 5 kilometre radius, at least 150 mines that tunnelled into the side of the cliffs to excavate and mine copper ore, that they would then bring to the smelting site and make into copper ingots, and then it would go off and be traded all over the Mediterranean world. Now, this is one of the shafts I was shown. There are 3 there. They're 40 metres deep. 2 are from the Iron Age, that is, from the 10th century BC, and 1 was made by the Romans down there to excavate and mine copper ore. And you can see how they've pulled up all this debris in order to get down to the levels where the copper ore was. And this is what it was all about, this stuff, copper ore. And when I went over there, I took some meetings in Poland, and my translator was a Polish guy from Melbourne, Zygmunt Ostrowski, and he said, listen, Mark, I'm translating all these meetings for you. I want to go and see this stuff. So we went on one trip, about 2018, we went to Turkey for 10 days after our meetings in Poland, because once you're over there, it's cheap to get around. So this time, we were over there just in 2023. We took some meetings in Poland, and we had 10 days in Jordan. And I made sure I communicated with Thomas Levy, the archaeologist who did this excavation in between 2002 and 2009. And he put me on to Dr. Mohammed Najjar, the Jordanian archaeologist who was involved in the excavation. So he said, fine, I'll take you to all these sites because tourists can't go there. You just pay us $600 US. Well, that was for both of us, and that's about $1,000. I thought it was worth it. Let's go. So this is us with him, and he's showing us the site that they had excavated in these 7 years from 2002 to 2009. He showed us here this great big 70-metre square-walled fortress. It's all broken down today, but this was a large fortress. Now, if you've got the largest copper smelting site in the ancient world, it's worth a lot of money. So they had a fortress to protect it. And they had over 100 other buildings that they found there. And wherever you walk around, and it's a huge site, they have these great big heaps of slag. It's a byproduct of copper smelting. So they've got to heat it up to in a furnace to a hot temperature to separate the ore from all the other mess. And a black bubbly kind of a slag comes on top, and they scoop that off and they just toss it out on the hill, and it hardens and it becomes this byproduct. And the ore, the pure copper, remains in the bottom, and then they make ingots out of that. Now these slag heaps, some of them were up to 6 metres deep. And it revealed a copper smelting industry that would have taken over 4 centuries to build up a slag heap 6 metres high. And there are heaps of this slag all over the place as far as you can look. This is just one. This is where Thomas Levy and Mohammed Najjar and their team, they actually dug down to bedrock, and they took parts of this slag, sent it off to the universities for carbon dating, because inside there was bits of the wood and so forth used in the burning to heat the furnace, and they dated it back to the 13th century BC. And the higher up in the heap you come, it came to about the 9th century BC. The site is 24 hectares. It's a massive Edomite copper smelting site, and it's not the only one, but this is the biggest one. They found there the moulds where they poured the copper to make ingots, and they have some in the museum in Amman, and this is what they used, and they traded this. So you imagine the kind of industry this would require that goes back to the 10th to the 13th century BC. Not only do you have all the miners in at least 150 mines around about, but then you have all those that have to carry it down to the copper smelting site. Then you have to have people providing food for all the workers and water and all this sort of thing. Then you have to have all the workers in the smelting site and producing all the copper ingots. Then you've got to have a whole trade system to export it out all over the Mediterranean and bring the money back. This is big business. Big business. And it's not, you don't have big business like that with a few nomads in a desert. This requires a kingdom and organisation. So the news began to come out after their discoveries there. Levy contradicts much contemporary scholarship, which had argued that because there'd been no physical evidence, no Edomite state had existed before the 8th century BC. Until the current discovery, many scholars had said the Bible's numerous references to Israel's interactions with Edom could not be valid. And of course, all that's changed now because of what they had discovered. Sky News reported ancient kingdom of Edom, presumed to be a Bible story, could actually be real. Scientists have discovered evidence of an ancient kingdom previously thought to have been a mythical creation in the Bible. Another one, archaeology confirms the book of Genesis on Israel's arch nemesis, the Edomites. And I was delighted to spend the day with Dr. Mohammed Najjar, and he told me there that the Edomite dates, as a result of their discoveries, have been pushed back 400 to 500 years to the 13th to the 9th century BC. And the evidence has come to light today. Israeli researchers identify the biblical kingdom of Edom, not only in Jordan, but Edom was also in southern Israel as well. So over there, you had another archaeologist, Professor Ezra Ben Yosef, from Tel Aviv University, and he was excavated in Timnah Valley from 2012 on. And he found exactly the same evidence there that they found over on the Jordanian side. He said, our results proved it happened earlier than previously thought and in accordance with the biblical description. Our new findings contradict the view of many archaeologists that the Arava was populated by just a loose alliance of tribes, and they're consistent with the biblical story that there was an Edomite kingdom here to manage this great copper industry. Now, Obadiah, in his book, speaking about the Edomites in the 6th century BC, he said this, he made this prediction. For your violence against your brother Jacob, shame shall cover you, and you shall be cut off forever. And then he makes a very bold statement. He says, there'll be not any remaining of the house of Esau, for the Lord has spoken it. Now that's a big prediction. There'll be none remaining of the house of Esau. Remember, Esau is the brother nation to the Israelites, and the Jews are all over the world today, aren't they? A distinct nation, a distinct people. But I tell you what, you find me anyone who's descended from the Edomites. Anyone have Edomite ancestry here? I've asked the question wherever I've gone. No, there's no Edomites anywhere. They're gone, disappeared from history. There'll be none remaining of the house of Esau, for the Lord has spoken it. And while there are over 15 million Jews today, the number of Edomites that are around are zero. And you don't have to be a believer to accept these things, because a fact is a fact. The Jews are everywhere and the Edomites are not. They're gone. And you have to accept that what the prophet said in the 6th century BC about the future of the Edomites has become exactly fulfilled. There is none remaining of the house of Esau. They have become extinct to history, but not so the Jews. Now notice what the prophet Ezekiel had to say concerning the land and the Edomites. He said, thus says the Lord God, because of what Edom did against the house of Judah by taking vengeance, and has greatly offended by avenging itself on them, therefore thus says the Lord God, I will stretch out my hand against Edom, and I'll cut off man and beast from it, and I'll make it desolate. And that's literally what it's like today when you go and visit around the Edomite territory. It would be desolate. Joel said, Edom shall be a desolate wilderness. And that's exactly what you've got when you walk around, just a desolate wilderness of the old Edomite kingdom. Now here, pointing to the right there, is where you have the narrow cleft, the Sikh pass. And from up on top of this Edomite mountain, where I stood back in 95, you can see another temple carved into the rock. Can anyone see it? Can you see it? You can't. Well, I'll show you where it is. See if you can see it now. Can you see it? Yeah. Well, let's go and have a look at it, shall we? Not that I want to, because it's a long way to walk. Well, first we've got to get down the mountain and climb another one. And it's going to take 2 to 3 hours to get down and climb up again to see that marvellous temple. And I was absolutely wasted. So let's just fly over like a bird and we'll get there quick. Here it is. And I had to climb up a mountain to have a look at this, take this view. When you get there today, the Bedouin have these signs, the best view in the world, and they're all over the place. And wherever the best view in the world means you've got to tax your energies with your legs to get up there and see it. But it's worth it. And actually, after you do this long walk up the mountain, you just turn this corner here and the sight just takes your breath away. It's 154 feet high, or 157 feet wide. And this is a colleague of mine standing in the doorway. So it's a massive, it's not as ornate as the Treasury, but it certainly is a magnificent structure. So there I am. I saw the best view in the world. Bother me, I better go and have a look, you know. So at least you can have some enjoyment at looking at the pictures. So there it is, looking back down on this tremendous structure. Now you can't do this today, but I'm glad I went there in 1995, because here I am in 1995. You could climb up. When we got there in 1995, no one was there. I mean, it was the first year they had 100,000 tourists, so not many tourists coming through. And there was just 2 Bedouin in a cave up there with an esky selling cold drinks. And they said to our group, they said, listen, for $20 US, we'll do a few tricks for you up on the temple. How about that? We said, yeah, sure. So, okay, this fellow was going to do some tricks. Now, by the way, after I climbed up there, I took a photo of the guy taking a photo of me. So there I am looking down over the edge. And we could walk down on the other side of it, on the path down. Here's a colleague of mine, Cranville Tooley. I think he's in North New South Wales. And there I am on the edge of the thing, looking down to our guys near the tree down below. Now here's this guy, Abdul Meneb. I call this guy the Tarzan of Petra. Let's increase the volume. And let's have a look what he does. There he is. He's climbed across there. There's only about a foot ledge there. And there's about 10 of us down below. And we were thinking he had well earned his $20 US, 150 foot down. His toes are hanging over the edge. That's the height. That's where he was. Now he's there trying to get down on top of this capital. By this time, look at him, jumping. We thought the guy's going to die. We were calling out, "Come down, you fool." So here he is. Now he's trying to get up. It sort of slopes up, and then he's going to climb up. And we thought he was really foolish now, trying to get up there. If he fell and rolled off, it's a long way down. But there he is, Tarzan of Petra. His mate used to get up there and do a handstand on top. But he had some bruised ribs because he had fell a few metres, so the other guy had to do it. All for $20 tourist dollars. Now look at this. Can you see him? There he is, jumping across like that. Look at this fellow. Yeah. Now I didn't take that photo. That's they used to have these guys, the jumping men of Petra. And this is what they do to earn a bit of money, these Bedouins. Now, workplace health and safety is coming to play now, and none of this takes place. You can't do any of that anymore. So I was very fortunate to meet that guy. Now, he'd be in his 60s today, all for a few tourist dollars. Well, you can imagine after doing all this walking and climbing up 3 mountains, you can imagine the condition of my legs, can't you? So as I walked down, I met these Jordanian tourist police, and I almost asked them to call for a stretcher to carry me up. I was willing to ride a camel, but this camel had had enough for one day, and he was not taking any more tourists. And here's a colleague of mine, John Horvath. He's retired over in Perth, and I went on a trip with him at a previous occasion, and he was trying to get him up, but he wasn't getting up for nobody. He had had enough tourists for one day, so he just flaked out. And we felt the same as that camel, I can tell you. And so I had to walk out. And, ladies and gentlemen, even though my legs by this time were throbbing, my ankles were swelling, I carried on, undaunted, irrepressible, unstoppable, and unrelenting in my determined resolve to bring you good people back some more of these wonderful pictures of Petra. Aren't you appreciative? There we go. So, with my audiences on my mind, I climbed yet another hill to photograph these magnificent rock-cut tombs. You know, it was the poet Burgeon who wrote, "From the rock, as if by magic grown, eternal, silent, beautiful, alone." And at the end of a long and wearying day, I found myself almost alone in Petra, and the setting sun painting a picture too beautiful to forget. And then at last I entered a small rock-cut tomb, and what I saw made the aching pain in my legs all worthwhile. Now I knew why the poet Dean Burgeon had called Petra the rose-red city, for the iron oxides in the Petra sandstone had painted pictures on the tomb walls that left me in awe at what I was seeing. For several minutes, I forgot about my throbbing legs. After walking, by the way, the last time was walking 26,000 steps up and down Petra mountains, and I just stood there marvelling at the natural beauty of Petra, the rose-red city. And so I combed through the tombs, and I beheld with my own eyes the natural beauty of this marvellous city of Petra. And I want to share those moments with you. So do you think my aching legs was worth it? Well, as I took my last look at Petra before making my 3-kilometre trek back through the Sikh, I couldn't help but think of what the prophet Jeremiah had to said about this intriguing city. For my sword shall be bathed in heaven, indeed it shall come down on Edom. From generation to generation it will lie waste, and he shall stretch out over it the line of confusion and the stones of emptiness. And so it is today. No one lives in Petra today. It's just stones of emptiness. The Bedouins have their villages nearby, but when the last tourist leaves Petra under the setting sun, and on my first trip, I was about the last on that day, Petra is just left shrouded in silence and emptiness. You know, I wish that every doubter, every unbeliever could stand where I stood in Petra, in some of these Edomite locations there, and open the old book of God and read the words of the inspired pen of these biblical prophets. Because I'm compelled to read the handwriting of God himself in the desolation and the perpetual ruin that surrounds Petra and the territory of the Edomite kingdom. Stones of emptiness, said the prophet Isaiah, and then a few verses later he appeals to us all and he says, "Seek ye out of the book of the Lord and read. Not one of these will fail." Not a single statement or prediction will fail, he said here. Against Edom, thus says the Lord of hosts, Edom shall be an astonishment. Everyone who goes by it will be astonished, and 1 million go there every year and are astonished. As when Sodom and Gomorrah and their neighbour cities were overthrown, says the Lord, no man shall abide there, nor shall the Son of Man dwell in it. And as I carried my aching legs back towards the hotel, I couldn't help but being astonished at what I had seen that day and every time I've been there. Because for me, I saw the Bible come to life. As these ancient predictions about these ancient civilizations literally meted me in my eyes. And I could see how literally true was the prophet's testimony and how history had fulfilled it. Sir Isaac Newton, English mathematician and astronomer and physicist, formulated the laws of motion and gravity that we all learnt at school. But what most of us may not realise was that he was also a keen student of the Bible. And his intelligent mind was captivated by the power of biblical prophecy. Listen to what this great scientist had to say about Bible prophecy. The design God gave the prophecies of the Old Testament that after they were fulfilled, they might be interpreted by the event and his own providence be then manifested thereby to the world. For the event of things predicted many ages before would be a convincing argument that the world is indeed governed by providence. That's a smart man. And that's exactly what you see, that when you go to these places, you see the evidence of fulfilled prophecy, giving evidence of the divine origin of the Word of God. And let me tell you, the evidence is overwhelming when you go around the Middle East and you investigate these amazing discoveries. I want to finish our session this morning with a poem I came across years ago, and it's called The Anvil of God's Word. Last eve I stood beside a blacksmith's door and heard the anvil ring the vesper chime. Then looking in, I saw upon the floor old hammers worn with beating years of time. How many anvils have you had, said I, to wear and batter all these hammers so? Just one, he said, and then with twinkling eye, the anvil wears the hammers out, you know. And so the Bible, the anvil of God's Word, for ages skeptic blows have beat upon, and though the noise of falling blows was heard, the anvil is unchanged, and the hammers are gone. Well, I hope you've enjoyed our little trek into the Edomite territory this morning, and I hope you'll be with us after lunch. And so now, from the people of Petra and from a very tired me, good morning, and look forward to seeing you after lunch when we discuss the Dead Sea Scrolls, Dead Men Do Tell Tales. It'll be a thrilling session after lunch. Thank you.